Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. It's Saturday, and it's the first week, end of the first week in September. I have with me in the studio Nicholas Richardson, correspondent, newsreader, legal man of legal affairs.
Indeed.
Are you an ambassador yet?
No, not yet, unfortunately.
No, you should be.
Somebody else said I should be, actually. You're not the first to have made that remark.
At least a consul.
Yes, but the trouble is, well, let's not get into the British Foreign Office these days because it's all too distressing.
Let's not do that. I got something fun for you to start with, though. You're going to like this. And I'm Will Richardson. That's Nick Richardson. I'm Will Richardson.
No relation.
I just like to say my name. That's why he's on the show. I like to hear it a lot. Mentioned as many times as possible. I'm going to invite more Richardsons. We're going to have a show exclusively Richardsons.
Good.
And everyone will just say,
"Hi,
my name is Richardson," and that'll be good, won't it?
Yeah, it'll be fantastic.
Yeah, you're looking forward to that. I know.
I am. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We won't be doing that show, folks. Don't worry. Not at all. I know. Yeah, I was reading. There's so many things going on.
It's a very busy time in the world. Yes.
Yeah. We have an election coming up in Poland.
An election coming up in the United States. I mean, it's a long way off, but it always seems with the United States elections.
It accelerates.
Perpetual.
When you get
perpetual, your electioneering is perpetual. It's no way to run a country.
When you get to this part of, when you get to the autumn before, a year before, that's when things start to heat up. Primaries are coming in January, February, through the first half of the year. And then you have the conventions. Conventions will be over by this time next year. We'll know who the nominees are.
Thank God for that.
We'll know who the nominees are, etc. But we also have we'll come back to this, but we also have an election coming up in Poland.
Indeed.
Which is very important. The government, sitting government, has been in for 2 times if they win again.
That would be unprecedented in the modern era.
That's right. It would be unprecedented. So that's a tough row to hoe. We'll see what happens. But also, you have, 5 parties that are mostly vying, and the possibility of coalitions is a tangled web. So that's something to watch. Maybe no one wins in the first election, or maybe, and there's a subsequent election in the spring, March, April, or it's entirely possible that we might have a minority government, which is a coalition of 2 parties, for example, or 3, depending on who would form that government. So it's going to be very interesting. And there's a lot at stake, isn't there, in these 2 elections? I suppose we should look at that subject. And I'll save the little story I have for you to make your heart glow.
Thank you.
For after this. But let's take care of this serious topic. I was on another channel talking on TVP World, actually, talking about the ramifications of the election on Poland and Central Europe, the American election, what it might mean. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, it ultimately depends who the candidates are. It's not entirely clear, is it? Certainly on the Republican side, I don't think it's clear. I think many people of both parties, it reflects the previous 2 elections. People would say, well, either candidate except the 2 we have would be appropriate. Biden, clearly, for whatever reason, I think is not capable, either physically or mentally, of doing the job. As we've discussed before, it's an impossible job even for somebody who's young and fit and healthy, and he's none of those things.
It's a terrible strain on any one person, unless you happen to be Donald Trump, who seems to love it.
And Kamala Harris is similarly, for different reasons, incapable of doing the job. She seems.
The polls suggest that you're not out on a limb when you say that. I mean, the polls are suggesting that both of them have very low support.
It is quite frightening that people who are so incapable should be even anywhere near the nomination or being nominated. I mean, this is what's frightening. But on the Republican side, I don't think it's much better.
Yeah.
I really don't understand why Donald Trump is so popular. I think the Republicans would be better placed choosing somebody else. I've always quite liked Chris Christie, but there may be reasons why he isn't. So what about the Haley DeSantis ticket?
Hang on. We'll get to that. But I just about Chris Christie. You know that his popularity was down in the low double digits.
Yeah, I know.
Before he went out, you remember that?
Yeah, but it seems a shame. I think he's a bit more.
He seems
a bit more on the ball than the others.
He's a good guy to be. You could use a guy like that in Congress, actually, just to shake things up and be a sort of devil's advocate. There isn't enough of that. I mean, there's some hollering, but there's not good devil's advocacy with good sort of coherent arguments. And I think perhaps Christie meets that to some extent. Certainly, it's a unique voice.
Yes.
Yeah, but go ahead.
No, but I know in that recent televised debate, which Trump didn't deign himself to turn up for, the performance of Haley was quite good, I thought.
She is.
And so, if you could
Haley, she's the former governor of South Carolina.
That's right. Yes.
Which, in many ways, is not a very significant state. It's not a big state.
No.
It's not a particularly wealthy state. Georgia's and North Carolina, which sandwich it, are the far more powerful states and more populous. But South Carolina has a long history and a long pedigree in United States history of batting, as we say in baseball, above its weight, and being a lot more significant than its position as a state within the hierarchy of states would suggest. So Charles Sumner, for example, the famous politician of the pre-Civil War time, and many others, Strom Thurmond, who stayed from South Carolina. You've heard of him?
Yeah.
He stayed until he was in his 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old Southern Democrat.
Yeah, had a young wife, had a 50-year-old wife or something. Yeah, which was quite a big gap in age. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting guy.
I just don't think Trump is the right person. I just don't think he is temperamentally the right person to be president. He's too much. He's too much of a thug to be president, as we saw last time round. He was right about some things, but being right about some things does not excuse everything else. That's my point.
You can be right about everybody in NATO paying their fair share, the 2% of their GDP, but you can say it in a much more appetizing and convincing way.
He claimed he was going to clear out the swamp.
And be more of a leader,
which he didn't. He would just surround himself. I think there were more billionaires in his cabinet than anybody else had ever had.
Well, those are his pals.
Exactly. So, you get a New York property developer as president, that's what you end up with, a New York property developer with all the pros and cons of a property developer. But I think he lacked the integrity to be president.
Property developers have one thing in mind: developing property and making a lot of money.
Exactly. And I think he saw the presidency,
which is driving the economy, but not necessarily.
The presidency as a sort of glory. The United States is a glorified building site which had to be developed in some way.
That's why you want to do infrastructure so much.
Exactly.
Think.
So I would hope that neither Biden nor Trump make it to the final round.
What do we do with Tucker Carlson, who seems to have gone off into the weeds, into the jungle, looking for Colonel Kurtz?
I don't know what we do with him. I don't really know what we do with him.
From the jungle. It's very strange because he's now said that they're sure, the Democrats are sure to want to assassinate Trump.
Well, I don't think
Did you hear that? Did you read
I didn't
that?
actually catch that, but...
No. It's a big thing that he said on one of his in one of his interviews. And now he's recently interviewed someone who says Obama is homosexual. He had a homosexual affair with Obama. Why we're talking about Obama's sex life at this point, I have no idea.
Well, exactly.
When we have serious problems.
There are too many nutcases around, and social media has given too many nutcases a voice.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. And then so people can tune in to equally mad people, and they can have this self-enforcing echo chamber. That's not a mixture of metaphors. And that is a problem. People only listen to what fortifies or strengthens their own weird beliefs in something, why you get all these conspiracy theories, which hitherto, when we
What about UFOs? I mean, UFOs are now mainstream. Did you ever think that the UFOs would be mainstream?
No, I didn't. I mean,
there is still no evidence. No one has even, we all have cameras now, and no one has any convincing film.
Like the Loch Ness Monster, nobody's found that either. These sorts of things.
Why do we need these things when we have so many practical things to do?
People have this urge to believe in things.
But life is such a beautiful mystery anyway, without all that.
Well, I know.
Just understanding why we're here and our position in the cosmos.
Because it's easier to believe in UFOs than it is to actually get an astronomy textbook out of the library and study it and then work out how things operate.
I know, superstition is much more captivating.
When G.K. Chesterton said people who don't believe in religion don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. And so we're all, oh, well, if you believe in God, you're stupid, it's all hocus pocus. And these are the people who will believe in hugging trees or UFOs or something equally or even more outrageous.
Okay, so why do these strange conspiracy theories multiply on the internet?
Because the internet gives a voice to people who would otherwise have not had anybody to share their thoughts with them. And a lot of people, I think, are spending too much time on the internet instead of actually going out and living in real life. That's part of the problem as well. Years ago, if you wanted to learn something or do something, if you wanted to get your message out, then you had to write to the editor of the newspaper, write a book, write a magazine article, persuade somebody to invite you on a television show, or make a documentary program.
Well, you had to make an impression.
But you had to. There was a filtering process. You had to persuade a number of intelligent people that what you had to say was a valuable message. Now you don't. You take your phone out of your pocket and off you go. And even more, you can do it largely anonymously. So you can say absolute rubbish, and there's
This is the part I really dislike.
Difficult for people to find out who you are. I mean,
I dislike that.
I use my real name on social media. I don't do much on social media.
So do I.
But so many people use silly names or different names, so they can't be tracked down.
Cockle-doodle-doo, 4931A.
Exactly.
And it's like, what?
Exactly.
And you're listening to this, but they quote people like that on shows. And I think to myself, if the person can't, how do you know who you're quoting?
I also think with the decline in the quality,
they're not accountable.
With the decline in the quality of politicians the world over, unfortunately, by and large, then people are also, and the decline in education in the West and the standards of ability to analyse, and then create a rational argument. People are encouraged. They think, well, these politicians lie, and look how well they do in life. So I might as well.
All I need to do is lie.
That's all I need to do as well. And this is part of the problem. This is why someone like Trump is such a danger.
Which brings me to, and my evil plan, brings me to discussing, or at least mentioning, these people who are putting out propaganda, Russian propaganda. Americans who are doing it, even Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's not a Russian. I'm not suggesting the Russians are paying him, although they may be paying some of the others secretly in back channels. But I'm not suggesting he's being paid. But he's certainly putting out pro-Russian propaganda, even if he doesn't know it. He's a passive asset,
strange, then,
as the sleuths say.
Yeah, useful idiot.
The secret sleuths. Yeah, a useful idiot. Which I thought I would never say, because he seems like
he seemed
a decent guy, but
in his prime to be quite sensible.
I don't understand now. I mean, he seems to not. His favorite place to come in Central Europe is not Poland or the Czech Republic or even Germany or the Baltic countries. It's always Hungary.
Hungary.
Yeah, and he loves to go to Hungary and talk to Mr. Orban. And Mr. Orban is a client of the Soviet Union, or at least he's looking the other way, pretending it's not happening, and not putting Hungary, not really opening up Hungary to the Ukrainian problem.
Exactly. Strange. So
It's caused a rift between Hungary and Poland.
That has, of course, it's probably partly mixed in with this American tradition of isolationism, which has been part of the problem. it was in the Second World War, for example.
And the First.
A lot of people in America say, why are we involved in this?
And the First War.
We are the new world. We don't want to be involved in the problems of the old world.
Well, this goes back to Washington.
Well, exactly.
And his speech, his farewell address that said, do not get involved in foreign
this is the
wars.
point. So there's always that. So people say, well, you know, where are our tax dollars? We should be spending them at home. We shouldn't be sending weapons to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly valid, you know, it's, oh, these silly Europeans are squabbling again. Perfectly valid American tradition. I mean, it's not actually true in this case. Because the world really has to do something about people who suddenly wake up one morning and think, well, I'm going to invade the next door country for a bit of fun. Especially when they have large amounts of nuclear weapons, and it causes problems when those next door countries are next door to countries which are your allies. So in a sense, it's hard for America to opt out. And I think this is the I mean, in previous generation, it was hard for the British to opt out. You know, you often think, crikey, can't somebody else handle this problem? But unfortunately, it's been placed on your
crikey.
Yes, it's been placed on your shoulders, and in this case, it's been placed on American shoulders. The alternative is leave it to the Chinese and the Saudi Arabians to run the world, or the Indians.
Well, they
and
can't.
I don't think the people who are saying, isn't the West terrible?
They can't run the world.
Isn't Russia wonderful? Would be at all happy if they were living in a world run by the Chinese or the Russians or the Indians.
No, because they can't do it.
No. Because
the Indians and the Chinese have never traveled well, and of course there are two of the top 5 superior economies now, but they've never traveled well. I mean, China, of course, is rivaling supposedly the United States. I don't really believe that, but I think they fudge their figures. But and they have a lot of internal problems that the United States, despite its squabbling, doesn't have. You didn't take me up on that.
No, it doesn't have the same problems.
Yeah, and they need the framework, which is the West.
And it's a
created, but they need the capitalist framework created by the West, that Adam Smith framework, that Western philosophy, that Smith-Hume dialectic. You know.
And then it's a shame, therefore, that we in the West, not you and I, and not people who think like us, but so many people, so many institutions who should know better, undermine that.
The Smith-Hume paradigm.
In Edinburgh, at Edinburgh University, they've renamed a building named after Hume, because allegedly somebody in Hume's family once upon a time had something obliquely to do with slavery. Complete nonsense. But this is the self-destruction.
Yeah, but that's another subject. The self-hatred.
But yeah, exactly. Which
Look,
is
here's the example. The self-hatred. Why? And we can use the case of the Belarus-Polish border, when we talk about self-hatred of Western people for their own society, like the United States and the others, and Europe. These people are being shipped in. They're willing to take a chance with a dictator who's a known liar, demonstrably a liar for 30 years in Belarus, Lukashenko. They're willing to leave everything behind, all their connections and everything, any family and whatever, and take a chance to come and run across the border into Europe from Belarus to Poland. Being told a lot of lies that they're going to be received with open arms and the usual nonsense. Oh, you don't need a passport. You don't need all that stuff, you know. You don't need a visa. Those people willing to die, the people crossing the American border are willing to die, the immigrants, the migrants, are willing to die to come into these countries that the people who live in them, who have enjoyed the advantages of those countries, seem to hate. So many of them. I'm talking about, I remember a conversation a couple of months ago, I remember vividly, with someone in the United States who's a political operative, one of the political parties, who was saying, I cannot wait to retire and leave the United States, you know, in 10 years or whatever it was, and live in France, in a wonderful country. I've got my place picked out, you know, in Alsace-Lorraine and near Strasbourg, and that's where I want to be. And I was thinking, Yeah, because I don't like this country anymore. I don't like what it's like. I don't understand that
No.
at all. I think the United States is still wonderful, but the thing is holding it back is a lack of confidence. The thing,
I don't think it's like that. I think it's being held back by a deliberate, a group of people in politics, in academia, for want of a better word, who have this very left-wing agenda of destroying everything. And they talk about diversity and inclusion, and they're completely undiverse, exclusive, and wholly and utterly racist. These are the people who talk about that all our problems will be solved by, to use their words, the death of whitey. If I said all Americans' problems would be solved by the death of black men, by the death of men who impregnate women and then abandon them, who are filling our prisons, people would think I'd taken complete leave of my senses. But if they say white man, no, that's okay.
You sounded like Enoch Powell.
No, but my point is, I'm illustrating the point. But Enoch Powell was not a racist.
No, come on.
And this is part of the problem.
It's foolish, and it's just stirring up emotions.
But it's foolish, it is encouraged by those who should know better.
I know.
The major universities, Harvard, Oxford, these people, they have this strange decolonizing music. Beethoven, a great...
They're against free speech.
A great contributor to the canon of Western civilization, is somehow at fault, according to the Oxford University Music Department, merely because he lived at the same time as some people were making money out of slavery. How stupid can you get in an academic institution?
What was that name again? What was that
Beethoven.
name? Oh, Beethoven. Let me write that down.
Yeah, write it down.
Is it spelled like beats or bet or yeah? Yeah. Oh, I remember that. They made a movie about him. I thought it was a dog.
With Gary...
I thought it was a dog.
Gary Oldman.
Oh, I know. I thought it was one with a dog in
Gary
it, with Charles Grodin.
No, I'm telling you, well, obviously you're American. I'm working at a slightly higher level of culture.
Yeah?
So my movie...
Oh, you pulled that high level of culture card on me.
Exactly.
Well, fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I've been known to watch the Trailer Park Boys.
This self-hatred or hatred of your country just seems to be very, very strange. And it can only be born of a luxury where you've never had to fight for your country. You take it for granted.
And
these people, they go to Washington, they pull down statues or whatever they do. They don't go to China and say, "I'm here to liberate the Uyghur population." Uyghur population.
They don't
protest outside the Chinese embassy because they know what's going to happen to them. But no, let's go to Washington where the police won't actually lock us up and detain us without trial for the rest of our lives.
Of course.
And this is the problem. And more people in authority and more of our institutions should say enough is enough. We've had enough of this nonsense.
People should be doing, those dummies should be going to work and contributing. Go get,
many of them are employed at the public sector.
Pay some tax, and and whatever, and do a job where you're offering a service of some kind or a profession, and Bob's your uncle.
But this is a
That's
problem.
what people should be doing.
They've not ever had to fight for anything of value.
Yes.
They have this entitled approach to life.
Yeah. So you think entitlement is one of the biggest problems? I want to come back to this Chinese and Indian thing because it's very good. And the BRIC thing, maybe we start off the second half with you talking about your recent television reports on BRIC for TVP. The BRIC being the Brazil, Russia conglomerate,
India,
China conglomerate, India, China, I don't know what the S stands for.
Well, it originally didn't stand for anything. It's now become South Africa.
Oh, it has?
Latterly, yes.
Right, okay. Okay, makes sense, I guess. And that is that these, India and China, are typical of the kind of ungrateful pupil who learns from the master and then wants to destroy the master because they think, they think they're cleverer once they've got a few of the secrets, but they're very unpracticed, untried. And they work within a framework of trade and innovation created by the United States or the Western countries and protected certainly by the United States Navy and to a certain extent some of the European navies combined, the British and the French, for example.
Yes, exactly. It's a bit like neutral countries in the Second World War. They just assumed that the right side would win and they pretended to be neutral.
I say we set the Japanese on them and let them think about it. Japanese are perfectly poised. And boy, those guys can build ships.
The Japanese, yes, they can.
Oh, yes,
they can do lots of things.
Yeah. They make
The
turn
Chinese,
out a lot
the
of
Chinese
ships.
are turning out even more ships these days.
Yeah, but their ships aren't very good. They're rather small. They have a lot of them. They have twice as many ships as the United States, but they have no carrier force groups, none of that organization.
Yeah, but they're building
they have
a
no
number of
experience of seafaring. They
No.
just don't, except in their region, and they're not effective outside of their region. This is what all the studies say. But you can know that just by having read Chinese history and knowing about them. You don't need someone else to tell you, really, if you just read a couple of books and see how the Chinese have been for thousands of years.
Under President Xi, they're getting.
We've got to go. We've got to
Okay.
go. Under President Xi.
They're
Hold
getting
that
a bit
thought.
belligerent.
They're getting belligerent, yeah. We'll see how much longer he's around. Thank you for watching. Enjoy these advertisements. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Okay, I'm with Nicholas Richardson in the studio. I'm Will Richardson, your humble correspondent. Glad to see you. You're looking well, must say. Now, Nicholas, are you aware, before we get into talking about BRICS, because you've been reporting on that recently, I think it'd be very interesting to hear what you have to say. I think people like to hear that. Have you any idea who which country Americans think is the best country in the world?
I do have an idea, actually.
You do?
I do.
What would your intuition tell you Americans would think is the best country in the world?
I don't know. I suppose a country where they spoke English.
It's not Poland.
No, it's not Poland.
Yeah.
And it's
Although
not-
it might be, but it's not.
Israel,
Yeah.
obviously. Some
It's
might
not
think
Israel.
Israel is the best place in
It's
the
not
world.
Israel.
Some like your...
Americans like France,
I was going to say, some like your friend like France.
and their favorite city is Vienna,
Vienna.
generally. And their favorite romantic city is
Paris.
Venice
Oh,
or
more-
Paris. Venice or Paris. But the favorite city of Americans, before we get to the favorite country, guess what their favorite city is in the world for Americans?
I don't know.
London.
I was going to say London, but I thought
Yeah,
it was a
and
bit obvious.
I think you hit on it by saying the language.
Yeah.
But there is also, let's face it, England is a very interesting place to visit. There's
It
so
is.
much history. It
There
is
is.
beautiful. The countryside is enormously
They
wonderful.
didn't build over it all the time.
Yeah.
It's the first, I think, of the great countries of Europe where we're now seeing a physical, geographical limitation,
Yeah.
which is putting its own strain on things, particularly in the southeast.
Too many people, yeah.
Too many people.
You have to get out to the West Country to really get
The
away
West
from the
Country,
sprawl.
yes.
It really doesn't end till you
And
get
England
out
is,
there.
for anybody from America, England is such a small country anyway.
It's tiny.
It is tiny.
Yeah. It's the size of the Russian minefields in Ukraine. That's
Yeah.
how small or large it is, actually.
Which
when you
actually
think
is
about it.
still quite a lot of area to have to demine.
Yeah, so what's the favorite country? then?
United Kingdom.
That's according to a recent survey. and
Indeed.
One of the that's going around. Other popular countries are Switzerland and France and Germany and Australia, New Zealand. I think New Zealand was number 2.
I think New Zealand was number 2 in that.
But
survey.
New Zealand is not practical.
It's a
but
long way off, but it's very beautiful. Of course,
it's an ideal, isn't
the
it?
idea of what really helped New Zealand get it on the map was the Lord of the Rings films, which were all filmed in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
The original 6, by which I mean the 3 Lord of the Rings and the 3 Hobbit films, I think were all filmed in New Zealand, which really showed people, I think, the magnificent natural scenery there is in New Zealand,
Yeah.
the North and South Island and so forth.
Where do you think Poland is in this favorite countries? Do you think it's in the top 20 maybe?
It must be in the top 20, I'd have thought.
I think it's edged into the top. I'm going to say it's edged into the top 20. There's been so much
News.
positive stuff about Poland as a travel destination, and not only for business too, commercial reasons. But I have to say, all of this has happened since I started doing Poland Daily Travel.
There you are. You are
Could this
instrumental.
could this be related?
It could be.
Could it be, or did I
You captured the wave.
And I think somebody just said to me, would you like to do a program traveling around Poland and showing people about Poland? I said, yes, please. That sounds fun, because I love the country, yeah, and the countryside and its multifarious aspects. It's beautiful, beautiful country. I was recently in Rzeszów.
Yes.
Where's Rzeszów? Do you know?
Southeast Poland.
Yeah. Now, how long would you reckon it takes to get to Rzeszów, and where would you go? The most direct route.
Well, like when I went to my one visit to Rzeszów a few years ago, and I made a video about that health tourism, I flew.
You flew, so you've never driven there?
Never driven that. I flew to Rzeszów.
Well, there is a nice highway that you take out. I mean, you know, the roads in Warsaw are amazing now. The way they've created this sort of loop road, well, at least around the western part of Warsaw, completely. And a tunnel that goes under the Vistula River, the Wisła, as the Polish say. And then you go, take that way and go under the river through this long, it was like 2 miles long tunnel, and you go into, towards Lublin. And you bypass Lublin. It takes 3 hours and 20 minutes, 3.5 hours. Of course, you can drive much faster. The only place you can drive as fast as you can drive in, say, Poland or Europe generally, is maybe New Mexico or Montana or Wyoming or something like that, where you can drive 85, 90 miles per hour and no one will bother you. But 3.5 hours. And what were you doing when you went to Rzeszów?
Somebody had an idea of health tourism where you spent a weekend somewhere nice, and you also had to check out the local hospital. So
they have great hospitals in Rzeszów.
I went to one of the hospitals in Rzeszów, and they were making a video, and I was seen undergoing various treatments.
Yeah.
And walking around the square.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. What do you remember about the square?
It was quite nice. Not huge, but quite manageable.
It's not huge.
And they have that very not controversial, but very that big monument statue, which is very famous.
Which one?
Because of the shape of it.
Really?
I forgot what it's called. It's this big. You can't miss it. It's a big sort of piece of modern sculpture.
What is it? It looks rather like a rocket or something.
Well, no, it looks more like a women's genitalia, if I would
put
it that way.
Women's genitalia.
Yes.
Okay.
The taxi driver, which is how the taxi
yeah.
drivers describe it, but in rather more colourful language.
Ah, right. I don't remember that.
Which always amuses the taxi drivers.
Oh, I probably walked right by it and didn't see it. I'll tell you, they have a nice local museum there with, if you like, paintings, historical paintings from the region, which is rare in Poland because so much of the art was taken and disseminated throughout, you know, the Nazi Empire.
Disseminated is a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, there's a beautiful town hall.
Yes, that is very attractive.
Which is rather compact. It's sort of fairy tale-like, but it's a beautiful building. And of course, it's the gateway to the extreme southeast and the Bieszczady Mountains, which is one of the loveliest areas of Europe.
Yes, and now in the current era, of course, it's quite a base for American military.
Right now, it is a big base. You see a lot of Americans there, but not only, a lot of Europeans. I was at the not the Grand Hotel, yeah, it was the Hotel Grand, in the lobby when a contingent of RAF and supporting people came through, off an RAF bus. And that's a normal sight. There's a hotel on the outskirts of the town that is full of people working on the airport and managing the planes and the trucks and things like that. All the different, you know, the tanks.
Stopping off point for all that kit going to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Or the kit that's staying in Poland, because remember Poland has got its border very well defended now, all the way down. It would not be an easy task to attack that border, which I always think about this Wagner types, you know.
Yeah,
I always
so
think
the
that
thing is, I'm not
being
I'm,
in Belarus, it
I'm
doesn't
not-
fill me with terror. I mean,
no,
those guys have been very good at dying.
Yes, and not
basically.
since Prigozhin died, of course. I'm not quite sure what.
We don't know he's
what-
dead.
Well,
I've heard he's not dead.
Well, our assumption is that he is dead, doesn't
Where's
it?
the funeral?
They had the funeral in Moscow the other week.
Oh, they did?
They did
Yeah.
have a funeral, yeah.
Hmm.
It does seem that he wasn't on the second plane after all. But I'm not sure what the Wagner Group, how effective it is now that the leader and the deputy leader are no longer with us.
Did they actually find any parts of him?
I think there was some...
Like his nose or something?
No, well,
Was
when,
that
when
in
I
one of the
read that-
Woody Allen movies? That was it?
there had been
that
some
was left,
DNA analysis apparently, but who knows? I mean, who knows?
No, but the Russians just make
who
things
knows
up.
Well, exactly. So,
Katyn, for example. Oh, it wasn't us.
no,
Yeah.
but yeah.
How many died? 20,000.
20,000.
We've never heard of it. Yeah,
Well, exactly.
yeah, never heard of it.
So it's hard to know what a threat they really do pose, because of course their leader, their late leader, was deceived by Putin to the extent that Putin said, "Okay, well, you're forgiven now. Go away and live in Belarus." And of course, he was hovering around even when they had all those African leaders visiting Moscow. Prigozhin was seen on the outskirts of the meeting. Outskirts of the meeting? Sort of
Was he? When?
No, when they had this summit for African leaders that they had in Moscow not so long ago.
Since he died?
No, not since he
No,
died.
before
he died. But
If he died.
after the aborted.
I don't know.
Coup.
Maybe I've heard even sort of supposedly, you know, straight from the horse's mouth intelligence reports have been wrong during the war, and that always happens. But one of them is that he is, you know, somewhere.
Okay, well maybe if he pops up in Belarus, we'll all.
You're not supposed to say where.
No, but
Mum's the word.
Yeah, but we.
I don't want to sink any ships, right?
Well, no, but we don't know, do we? Unfortunately,
I don't know. I don't know.
We don't know, but I think let's assume, for the purpose of the debate, that he is dead. Then I think the Wagner Group is a lot less of a threat, because Putin broke his word to Prigozhin.
Yeah.
Now, even among thieves, generally, you might expect if Putin said, "I'm not going to kill you," he's not going to kill you.
Well, the old pirates, you know, they had to keep their word, or they
Well, this is the point.
wouldn't be able to sail
and
the
so
ship.
that's a very bad sign to anybody else who's ever believed anything Putin told them, unfortunately. So it's not done Putin. I don't think Putin has come out very well from all of this. He should have crushed it straight away.
He was such a good guy before.
He was such a good guy before.
I mean, that's a guy you could really, you know.
But it
a
seems,
warm-hearted
if you look at
individual.
it does seem quite clear that Prigozhin, when he set off on June, whatever day it was, 22nd or 23rd or whenever it was, or 24th, can't remember what day, it was a Saturday morning, wasn't it? So it'd be the 24th of June. He must have been expecting some support from Russian military somewhere along the line. 'Cause you don't set off to Moscow to stage a coup in a couple of cars. He must have been. He must have
Mussolini
been.
did.
Yeah, but he must have been expecting to pick up support along
How
the way.
many black shirts did Mussolini have when he went and marched on Rome?
I remember.
Well, not such a mechanized time, but I don't think he had any more than.
No, but I think Prigozhin
Prigozhin had.
must have been expecting more to join from the Russian military.
Who knows? It's impossible to know. It's an enigma wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in a pancake with an extra special sauce.
It's one of those Russian doll type
It
arrangements.
was a Russian doll. I mean, you know, it was a John le Carre and Churchill sort of mixed together metaphor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tinker Tailor's oldest spy.
Exactly. Impossible to understand.
Impossible to understand.
The Russians is just so difficult. What about BRICS?
Yes, what about BRICS?
What is BRICS?
Well, BRICS originally is Brazil, Russia, India, China. And I thought the term had originally been coined by some investment bankers at the time of the 90s, early 90s, of all these emerging
like it.
markets.
Yeah.
But somebody, it may have been, I don't know, some bank just coined this idea of the others. You know, there was Eastern European, very important emerging markets and other places.
Sure.
And they just wrapped up all these other countries which are expected to grow
Yeah.
at a similar... Anyway, it seems then the S was suddenly, afterwards then became South Africa. And it seems this grouping has become more, rather than just an investment banker's castaway remark, has actually turned into something. And they had a gathering not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago, in Johannesburg, and invited some other countries to join.
Did Putin show up there?
Putin didn't show up.
Yeah.
He contended because the South African says, "Please don't come because we'll have to arrest you."
Oh, they said that.
They said because under some pending.
You see, rifts in the alliance.
Exactly, but they have invited some other countries to join the group, including Iran, Ethiopia, but more importantly, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates.
What do the Emirates want with that?
Well, they've been invited. Like the Saudis have been invited.
They've been totally propped up by the United States and Western Europe.
Within the grouping itself, there are a lot of...
None of them want to go live in any of those countries.
Yeah, but within the group itself, there are a lot of conflict.
Do you know what's in common? What do all of these countries have in common, these BRICS countries?
Particularly pleasant places to live if you're used to Western democracy.
There's a lot of lawlessness. There's a lot of dictatorialism.
Well, there's not much lawlessness in Saudi Arabia.
Can I say dictatorialism? Dictatorship.
Dictatorship. There's sort of dictatorship in Saudi Arabia. It's a little freer in the United Arab Emirates, I gather. But
yeah, I mean, actually, the Emirates are the most pleasant of all those places.
But even so, you're still living in very hot places where they would strike me as being a sort of very hot shopping centre. Yeah. With a couple of swimming pools attached or something.
Yeah.
But within the and of course this is part of the old. Has become like India, this idea of being non-aligned, playing both sides off against each other. Brazil, of course, doesn't really...
So the I stands for India and Iran.
Yeah, well, it would generate in India.
It will eventually.
Brazil, of course, doesn't really want to sever ties with the United States from an economic point of view. Mm-hmm. So there are tensions in the organisation. Saudi are doing a lot anyway. They're becoming much more dominant within the region. Mm-hmm. So they're probably the best bet is that from a Saudi point of view, whether they join, it's 50-50. They're not quite sure. There's some pros and some cons.
Yeah, okay.
Saudi probably doesn't want its wings clipped too much, but it's probably not, it gives it more influence. So of course, India and China, there's always been tension. You'll recall every so often the Chinese, and they have done just recently, just before the G20 meeting, which is taking place this weekend in India, published their map of China with the 9 dotted lines, which have now become 10 dotted lines, claiming the whole of the South China Sea as Chinese territory. But interestingly enough, they've moved the border south to take in part of India as well. So again, these are the sort of tensions that these groupings have. So it's hard to know whether it's serious, or rather hard to know to what extent it's going to be a serious global change in the geopolitical economic alignment. Probably not very much. But it does show that other groupings are beginning to emerge in the world. So even within the original BRICS, you have these tensions.
Yeah, but every one of these countries, even though they're emerging, none of them can operate without those markets created by Western Europe and the United States.
Well, this
and
is
the consumerism.
You make a very good point. This is the point that people have forgotten. That they're always attacking the West, and the West is terrible. But without what the West has created, China exists because some smart aleck in America decided, oh, guess what? I can move all my factories to China, make a lot of money, and leave my workers who...
Oh, and exploit the slave-like population while I criticize Americans for having owned slaves.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is it would be a joke if it wasn't so sad for the people.
But why don't people just say this?
Well, some try to, but of course on Facebook, if you try and say no, your post is removed because it disagrees with their unknown communities. So, I mean, Facebook is a good example of how a Chinese totalitarian system works.
But Facebook's useless.
We're banning your post because you've broken a community standard, but we're not telling you what the standard is.
There's no point in trying to have anything serious on Facebook.
Well, I realise it's becoming less and less
even
important.
Really funny. Unless it's a meme or something.
Well, exactly. That whole thing is becoming... But this is part of the problem. But China would not exist in its modern form without everything it has created in terms of economic wealth is because we've done it for them.
Exactly. India, ditto.
India did not invent the iPhone. Yeah. China did not invent the iPhone. Some guys in California
India didn't invent
iPhone.
Land Rover either.
No. But we've...
Have you ever seen the cars the Indians or the Chinese came up with?
Dreadful, by and large.
Yeah, but we're supposed to be afraid of the Russians, for that matter.
But on a serious point...
At least they had a ZIL.
Electric vehicles, the Chinese are ready to flood Europe with electric vehicles. In fact.
I think they should have called the ZIL a nil.
Yeah, but they are getting a bit better. Their modern generation of electric vehicles are ready to swamp Europe the major.
But electric vehicles are no good anyway.
Well, I think I suspect that
combo vehicles are better.
electric vehicles, as we currently see them, are a sort of intermediate technology. Something, the way you remember it, the DVD or
intermediate.
There'll be something else will come along which will render all this.
Oh yes,
like for
hydrogen.
You remember? Yes. Well,
hydrogen.
Toyota are already beginning to build. I think in the UK they're building for light commercial vans. They're building a factory to make them. But do you remember, for example, light bulbs, the old traditional light bulb?
Okay.
And then for a short time, the EEC outlawed,
which was a miracle.
Outlawed these. You had to have these low energy ones, which you could see, which were 10
good.
times the price.
Yeah.
And obviously,
but they last a lot longer.
Yeah, but the light fades. They're bad for your eyes because the light fades. It doesn't just go out. But anyway, that's now been replaced by LEDs, in fact.
No, LEDs is the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, but there was a low energy light
There was
bulbs.
an intermediate one.
Yes, but that's my point. I think electric vehicles fall into that, which was a much more complicated solution to the problem. And although it may have used a little less energy, you could see by looking at it the amount of stuff required to manufacture it was completely disproportionate to the alleged saving. So I think electric vehicles in their current lineup will become also an intermediate technology. You heard it here first. I suspect that because I think the Japanese, particularly Toyota, are very keen on hydrogen. JCB, who make the excavators, have concluded obviously that electric vehicles will not work on building sites and places where you're moving earth, and they've invested.
We're running out of time.
Yes,
we got 5 minutes, but I want to. There's a couple of things else I want to.
It's your show. Feel free.
Well, thanks, but it's not a show. It's not 2 hours or 3 hours long. I wish it were. So we could. We'll have to do a podcast because it's a good conversation. You were reading something that I sent you about General Petraeus, and who I think is pretty good on assessing the war, and which is the greatest conflict since World War II. I mean, people just don't seem to understand that, but it can't be said enough. I don't think how important what is going on is, and how different it is from every other conflict since World War II, and how brutal it is. I mean,
it is very brutal. We don't really pick up that. For
it's
example,
terrible.
We don't pick up the losses which Ukrainian forces are suffering because of the lack of battlefield first aid equipment of the requisite standard. And I was reading, for example, even something as simple as tourniquets. A lot of Ukrainian injured soldiers are dying because they don't have something as simple as good quality tourniquets.
I know.
And this is tragic. And
why not?
And
this is the easiest thing to supply.
Part of the problem is they probably just never had it.
Well, no, but if you're going to send things, you've got to send, you're going to send guns, you've got to send
of course.
first aid.
And I think also, again, there has been some suggestion in the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense of some form of corruption and stuff has not been,
in war, haven't you ever seen Kelly's Heroes? There's always corruption in war.
That was a comedy film, wasn't it?
It's a comedy, but have you ever seen MASH? I mean, they're comedies, but they have a basis in reality.
And also,
they're not just made out of whole
cloth. Some of the Ukrainian medics who've been trained in European countries saying we were trained on battlefield medical equipment. Yeah. But this is NATO battlefield medical equipment, which we just don't have in Ukraine. Yeah. So the training was interesting, but of less practical value because unless you can get the medical kits to them.
Do you think Petraeus is right about the possible breakthrough?
Yes. The problem is this breakthrough has been hindered by the lack of, because Petraeus is looking at this in the sense of a NATO approach to warfare and breaking through, and there has been some limited breakthrough, but what has been lacking is air cover, and you can't break through effectively without air cover, and the Ukrainians don't have it, which is why they've been asking for a long time for appropriate jets to help them. Because you can send in tanks, you can send in people, but the way you fight a battle these days is with an integrated approach, and air cover is vital in that. Yeah, and they haven't had it.
Well, the air cover has been a problem the whole time, but there are planes coming, and there are pilots. I don't know, as soon as those planes are there are pilots who've been trained. People are, they got to train the pilots, but they've been training those pilots. The Ukrainian pilots have been flying in these planes for years now.
For example, that who was it? The Dutch have 62 F-16s, but it's not sure when they're actually going to release them.
Yeah.
Somebody else is planning to send some F-16s in 2025,
Yeah.
which is...
Breakthrough, successful or not, and how soon? Because they say this push is going to go until they can't go anymore, which
yeah,
means...
and the tragedy is they may run out of... It's like anything. It's, you know, a little tappy. Sometimes you need a big hammer blow. And that's what I think Ukrainian wanted. And it's been this sort of drip, 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 which is not as effective as a big push because they haven't had all the equipment they needed at the time they needed it in the place they needed it.
Last word. Did you read about Elon Musk not letting them use Starlink, which prevented an attack on the Navy using drones, on the Russian Navy?
This is the problem in a world where we have become...
What's your opinion on that,
well,
as we end up here?
Yeah, well, it's not for Elon Musk to decide who can or cannot attack things. Again, it's unfortunate that so much of the world these days is dependent on a handful of tech billionaires who have their own particular whims.
I know, it's like...
And this is a part of a wider problem. We're all dependent on their technology, and they are odd people, and they have peculiar politics, very peculiar.
They can do, and they tend to live in a very specific milieu, a specific environment. It's like having a bunch of different Howard Hugheses. People may know the film The Aviator or read a book about Howard Hughes. It's like having a bunch of rather eccentric characters in charge, which can be a problem. We got to finish.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you, Nicholas. I want to thank you for being here. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, that was Nicholas Richardson, correspondent, lawyer, and man about town and about the country, and not only this country, also America's favorite, the UK. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Will Richardson, and we'll see you next time.